Welcome back to the video, and in this one today we're going to be doing some kind of concept art. We're going to be drawing a little bit, and I'm going to let you guys know I'm really not an artist. I don't really draw very often. I just like to doodle every now and then, so don't expect anything like too crazy. You get the point. But we're going to be kind of showing off some of the things that are in Shadow of Evolution, and just kind of my whole sci-fi universe, kind of just a few things here and there. So maybe some monsters and characters in the whole sci-fi kind of universe that I built. So here we go. We got some paper here, and also we also have this kind of little draft paper here that I made last year that kind of showed off some weapons, I guess. It says draft weapons, so they're not really canonical. It's just some ideas kind of going. We got the high caliber pistol, the laser revolver pistol, the automatic rifle, and the bullpup sniper and DMR. So just some small things here and there, but we're gonna go ahead and draw a few things. So let's get started. So obviously, like I said, here we have the draft weapons and whatnot. So as you can see, I had a couple ideas here and there. We had this laser revolver here. I do kind of remember the concept of this. The whole thing was, it was kind of like a revolver-esque kind of weapon. It had this little energy kind of cylinder, like a battery, I guess, and it would shoot, kind of lasers and all that. So some kind of stuff like that. So this, this is about to be some kind of like 9-year-old, imaginary like crazy, ideas and all that, because I'm going to be describing some over-the-top, imaginary and like science fiction stuff. But that's what I like, and obviously that's what you're wanting to see for this video, I guess. So, and here we also have this little high-caliber pistol. I did have a little bit of circles here and there. We had some over the little muzzle brake and this little stock and this flashlight here. So I guess I think I remember that these were supposed to be kind of interchangeable. If you were to possibly replace them with something, you want a stock on it, a different muzzle brake, all these different, attachments you could put. We have this automatic rifle, stock. I'm not really a big fan of this. Let's see, we got the little trigger here, and I guess the mag well and the magazine. This bullpup sniper and DMR does look pretty neat. It looks like I did the most amount of effort in it. And we got our little, bipod right here. We got the muzzle and the barrel and everything. And then we got this little top part that kind of looks like it's either, I guess, part of the gun, or maybe it's like like a handle, kind of like how a FAMAS is. Little foregrip, trigger. I think this is definitely the magazine. I guess the stock. I don't know if that's just how it is, or maybe it's able to be, adjustable. So I don't know. But anyways, we're gonna put this to the side, and we're gonna get started. I'm gonna actually insert this big overlay of like a voiceover, because it's interesting, and because throughout the video I really didn't have that much dialogue anyway, so it'd be good to kind of do some commentary about what I'm drawing and what I'm doing here. So we have the SOA here, which stands for the Special Operations Armada, which is this military group in our sci-fi universe that I've crafted here. And we're gonna be doing Alpha Team's helmets. Now the SOA has these major teams, and I am working on the different name for that, because I do want to have some kind of pizzazz with that too. But we're going to be doing the SOA's Alpha Team helmets. And there's a couple operators. There are 6 operators, for Alpha Team, and there's also going to be other teams within these kind of the major teams division of the SOA. The Special Operations Armada they are what they imply they are, is special operations. They're an armada of a bunch of elite task force groups, and a bunch of different agents and scientists all working to try and better benefit society and the world and everything. So they're a relatively new military branch within Shadow of Evolution, but there's a lot more to them. There's a whole lot of depth with them. First, we're going to be drawing Baron. That's all their code names here. I'm not going to discuss the actual names of them, but just their code names for now. We're going to be drawing out Baron, which is our commander of Alpha Team. Now, Baron has this really heavy armor, which is under the Centurion armor line, with gear and everything. And his has kind of this, kind of like an upside down kind of L shape of a visor. And a lot of the armor in Shadow of Evolution is really futuristic, and I really wanted to go for, the kind of futuristic look, but not the really over the top kind of look. I wanted to have it, fathomable, something that would make sense for military use, and something that's understandable and why they wear it, and there's a certain reason why they have these certain things. But obviously it's sci-fi, so not all these different things are going to make much sense. And not only that, some of it may not even make sense in general, because I'm talking like a kid describing certain things and certain things that he thinks is cool. So Aside from that, my drawing isn't really the greatest, like I said before, but I'm gonna try my best to really describe what's going on and really convey what at least my personal image of what everything is. And later on in the video, I'll be showing a bit of some Bionicle and kind of Lego Hero Factory mocks I've made that kind of do represent some of the characters in Shadow of Evolution. So Baron is the very stern and very stoic leader. He's been the longest person in the service of the SOA's major team divisions, and even before the formation of these major teams, all of the operators that reside within it, all the major teams, are formerly usually the very big special operatives, special task force groups for other military branches, whether it be the Army, the Navy, Marines, whatever it is. They can be all these different special forces groups, and they all come together and eventually get either ranked up or handpicked by the Special Operations Armada to work for them. Now, there's a lot more in detail on what it takes to join the SOA, but for now we're just going to be describing some of the characters and some of the stuff I wanted to talk about it. So on the side of Rome's helmet, there's this kind of comm system that he has, and along with that, he always has this thing on the side that he always engraves with a knife, no matter how old or new his paint job is, and this reads your prayer. Now, there's a lot of depth to why he has this here, but we'll later figure that out in Shadow of Evolution when the book does come out. So next up on the list we have Rome. Now Rome is actually our main protagonist in the whole Shadow of Evolution novel series, and he is the second in command of Baron. He is the second long-lasting person who's been in the service. His visor is more V-shaped and is very wide, so we can get a better angle in seeing things. He also has the same kind of communication system as Baron. His helmet and most of his gear is a little bit lighter and more for reflex, and this is part of the reflex armor and gear line of what's in the Shadow of Evolution universe. So it's a lot more lightweight and it's a lot more for dexterity, reflex, and it's a lot more futuristic and more high-tech in comparison to some of the other lines of gear. And also one thing that does make Rome stand out is these kind of side studs on the very bottom of the helmet where his mouth would be. It's kind of hard to really give them a full-fledged purpose. I kind of just had them there because I thought they'd be kind of cool. I can't really get too much detail out while drawing this. It's more, more really for show, but I do need to add a bit more of a purpose and reason why he does have these kind of side studs on the bottom of his helmet. They're not really too described in the novel, and they're really not much of a use in the novel anyway, so maybe I'll decide to get rid of them later on, or maybe keep them for certain use. And next up on the list, we have Vice. Now, Vice is, well, I didn't do anything for him because I didn't have any ideas at the moment. Now, Vice is the big reconnaissance and scouting operator of Alpha Team. He does a lot more than that, but that's mostly his main thing. And the reason why I also don't do his helmet is because I really didn't think of much of him in terms of concept, besides of him being kind of the more futuristic and more, of the very technical attention to detail kind of armor. And most of it I didn't really have fleshed out because he really doesn't make too much of an appearance, at least in the first novel we have. And personally, I just don't have enough detail inside my brain and just not enough context in the book to really determine his armor as much. And along with that, it's because I've also made a couple more mocks of him, but a lot of his helmets I don't feel are very fitting for his character if I was to make certain concept art or create something different from him. So moving on, aside from all of the 3 operators that I've tried to draw here, we're not going to draw all 6, but we're going to move on to weapons here. So weapons in Shadow of Evolution, there's a huge line of them. A lot of them are futuristic, they're a little more high-tech. I gave them my own kind of little pizzazz with certain things I like. As you saw in the first part of the video, I did have some ideas for different weapons and everything. And I do have quite a bunch of ideas listed out here, and there's even more to come soon, especially because even after I started recording this video, I got more of ideas that I had just kind of dormant in the back of my head that I've wanted to draw, but I just didn't fit for the video. But I did add one on the very bottom, which you'll see later on. So the first one on this list, we kind of have this light machine gun here. This one I felt was pretty interesting because it's light, but it's also meant to be mounted on a certain light, aircraft or land vehicles and stuff like that. It's a very versatile choice because not only is it lightweight enough for someone to carry, it's also perfect for having it as mounted and, vice versa, able to take it off and also able to mount it pretty fast. So it has a nice little handle here, you know, to have a grip on. It's got the front little barrel here that helps you kind of grip it. And then you have the tripod, you have the magazine. You know, it looks like it's kind of angled down, but I can assure you it's to the side. Or maybe I can make it, you know, as a variant, or maybe, you know, in later concepts I can have it to the bottom so it can have a better, you know, even weight distribution and everything. So here we have the ejection kind of ports, and then here we have the spot where we can add, you know, if you wanted to add certain grips, you know, whether it be mounted or if it was unmounted, you can have it as a kind of a regular kind of foregrip, and you can also have the circular one for better dexterity and better handling if you're, you know, ambidextrous or anything like that. You know, I can't really describe some of the words from time to time. You guys know me. And then obviously we have the trigger here and everything. So this one's interesting because it is, at least in certain lore parts, it is used by a bunch of military groups, and it's also used by a lot of big terrorist groups too, due to its versatility, ease of handling, ease of access and everything. So, and moving on from this, we have the second one here, and this one is kind of a sniper. I didn't put too much detail into it, but the one thing that does make this thing stand out is the kind of computer system that's inside of it. I put quotations over computer system because it is kind of light, you know, it's not like it's some kind of crazy machine, but it does have a CPU system that kind of assists you with trying to scope in and sight in certain targets and just kind of track them better. Third one on this list I wanted to really put is Baron's 950 cannon. So if you don't know what a 95 JDJ is, it's basically this giant round that's even bigger than a 50 cal. And I thought it was really interesting to add for the kind of over the top part of this sci-fi universe. So that's a little bit, there's gonna be hints of kind of stuff that's over the top, and it's just gonna be kind of, you know, like, that's kind of crazy, why the hell would that be there? But at the same time, I just really wanted to add that flair because I personally love the absurdity of the 95 being on a arm and everything, and I like the fact that, you know, the commander's using it with such heavy gear he has and everything. But I did add some cool lore details to it, such as he's only able to carry about 10 rounds. I'm trying to figure out if I want him to have a ammo reservoir to the side or bottom of his arm, or if I want it to be like fed through a, you know, a certain system that's connected to another part of his body, maybe to an ammo pack on his, you know, his belt, or maybe his back, maybe to his shoulders, somewhere on his body. But yeah, that's Baron's 950, his 95 cannon, and obviously it packs a punch. You can easily look up how a 95 works and everything. And it's absolutely insane because if you really think about it, Baron using his armor and then the whole arm cannon thing, it's the amount of recoil and the amount of compensation it has to do in order to make sure it doesn't completely blow his arm off or break anything is pretty interesting. So it also shows how resilient and durable the armor is, along with its capabilities of being able to handle a 95 cannon, at least for the Centurion gear line of armor and, you know, gear. So on the cannon, we have this kind of compensation system that allows the whole cannon to kind of move back to compensate for the recoil, and then obviously the kind of bottom system that attaches to the arm and everything. So moving on, we have the fourth one, which is the Corruptor Stage 3 arm mutation. So this one is going to be completely different from the conventional amount of firearms that were kind of listed out here. But this one also falls into the more monster and kind of enemy kind of characteristic and area of Shadow of Evolution. So Corruptors in Shadow of Evolution are basically, in a nutshell, they're basically just insane and psychotic people who've been possessed or infected with this kind of sickness, right? And as time progresses, it just gradually gets worse and worse, or through certain ritualistic means, it just gets worse and worse, depending on, you know, where there is. There's a lot of lore tied behind it. But later on in other videos, I'll describe more of the Corruptors and their stages of mutation and everything. So stage 3 is they have 4 stages of mutation, 4th being the max and worst, and stage 3 being the most combative and near the worst, obviously. So here we have the arm mutation, and for this one, it was a really interesting one that I had a lot of thought into, and I really wanted to make it really unique. But here we have this arm. It didn't really look like an arm, but you know, we have this arm here, and it's going to be basically filled with, you know, a very volatile liquid, you know, acidic. Maybe it'll be noxious, you know, maybe it's some kind of volatile characteristic that comes with the liquid, right? So the whole arm becomes to slowly get swelled and swollen with a bunch of liquid, and at the very end of the arm, where the forearm meets the wrist and everything, the hand and wrist will either fuse into the arm, or it will completely snap off by the Corruptor himself. He or she will probably rip it off the arm, or like I said, it'll fuse in. And with all that, the the remaining bone becomes a lot more sharpened and more elongated, and because it's pushing room, a lot of the skin becomes more inflamed and more pushed out, so everything just becomes a lot more swollen and a lot more larger, right? So with all that, all the veins and arteries within the arm slowly begin to form barrels, in quotations, right? So near the wrist, there's going to be a collective of veins that just clump up and basically form a bunch of tiny barrels that shoot out this toxic liquid at foes or whatever it needs to. And the more uniqueness part of this is that if it doesn't use all the veins, it will decide to mutate into one large kind of artery, or maybe the few arteries within the corruptor's arm will eventually fuse together to make one kind of large artery, which will create just a larger barrel, which will in turn create a much larger projectile and a lot more of maybe a spread, or maybe like I said, a single projectile for whatever the corruptor's wanting to shoot with its toxic liquid and everything within its body. So the bone, like I said, also sticks out and whatnot, making it a good melee kind of weapon too, and also adds to its kind of violent and disgusting nature, all of that. Moving on from that, we have Riot's Kanabo. If you don't know what a Kanabo is, it's basically a really old, it's basically a bat with like metal studs in it. It was used by certain samurai, I believe, and it was usually used to break armor and to really break bones and everything. So it's a very interesting weapon to me. I do like the kind of blunt force weaponry and all that, and I really wanted to add a Kanabo, not just with this character, which is Riot. I wanted to add it with another character in the novel as well. The character Riot in Shadow of Evolution is this basically giant crime boss. He's a big terrorist kind of warlord from the terrorist group known as Veritas, or Veritas. I'm really not too sure on the pronunciation, kinda. I do need to look it up and everything. Even though I have written it in my book time and time again, it's a very big part of the novel. I mean, I really should keep up with how the pronunciation is for it, but I digress. So one thing that's really interesting with Riot's Kanabo is that it actually attaches to Riot's armor as its spine. Now, it attaches there, but it doesn't act as the spine. It just adds as a spinal reinforcement and just as a good storage part for his Kanabo. And with all that being said, his Kanabo is only two-sided, so maybe it really doesn't fit into the big category of Kanabos and everything, but that's the closest thing I can kind of really get to without it kind of being maybe a serrated sword. But in reality, it's not serrated. It just has large studs or maybe large spikes, but at the same time, I feel like spikes aren't going to be really as good because obviously they dull after rugged use and everything like that. But we're just going to go with kind of side studs. Maybe I'll have the spikes interchangeable for different concepts. He's able to take it off his armor whenever he wants, and it's a really interesting weapon to use, and just the concept alone I thought was really interesting because you see it on his armor and it looks pretty neat, just the idea of it, and then his ability to just take it off and him be able to use it and everything and just pick and choose whenever he wants to use it. It's a really interesting and versatile weapon that I thought of, and I find it really interesting because not only is it a perfect part of his armor and it fits the aesthetic of his armor too, but it's also a very, very unique weapon because you don't really see another similar weapon to it other than an actual Kanabo later in the novel. So moving on, we have the Knight's Greatsword. Now this one is really interesting because it also falls into the enemy kind of weapon. The Knight, which is a pretty basic name, I will say, but I mean, it's basically what the name implies. It's a knight, but there is a lot more to this knight than what it seems. There's a lot more to this than just your average knight. The enemy of the knight is a very antagonistic role in the novel, and I will describe him in another video. Later on, I will mention that I'll probably have a kind of character profile series that will give you some good insight on the characters as part of this book, but I really don't want to spoil too much because obviously I want this book to get some really good surprises and everything, and I really don't want it to get too spoiled. I do want you, the reader, to see these things, and I also want the reader to kind of have their own visual interpretation of everything. But the Knight's Greatsword is an interesting weapon because it is just this basically oversized, great sword. And the one thing that is kind of, it's over the top a little bit and it is kind of childish, but it's able to cast flames, right? Not just engulf the sword in flames, but it's also able to cast flames in a direction. It has the ability to manipulate flames and whatnot to its own will. And along with the flames on the side, it's a mostly average sword, but one thing that does stay persistent is that it always stays sharp shiny and clean, no matter how dirty or how scraped up and beat up it gets. It manages to stay perfectly pristine. And on the side of this sword, there are writings of unknown languages, so that's another interesting touch that I wanted to add there. And the very last thing here, we have the laser spreader. This was something that I added later on after I recorded this video because I thought of more ideas. But basically the laser spreader is, I got the initial idea from looking at a simple tripod. I thought of the 3 prongs that you have and basically thinking about an energy shotgun or like an energy Gatling gun in a sense. So I decided to go with the kind of shotgun variant. I didn't write out the minigun variant or like the Gatling gun variant, but maybe later on I will. And here we have the batteries and kind of power source here. We have the prongs here that I'm not sure will either be for, those are barrels, or it'll be where it's the energy shot from, or maybe it's just aiding in its, launch, which maybe the middle part will be the barrel. I'm not too sure yet. And then obviously you have the handle, everything else is kind of normal here. And then obviously you have the stock and everything, and the kind of computer system on the very edge to kind of tell you some things. So that's kind of it for the drawing concept kind of aspect of everything here. And I will say that I'm not, like I said, I'm gonna say it again, that I'm not the greatest illustrator out there. I really don't draw a bunch, but I do have a lot of ideas that I do sometimes just want to jot down. So feel free to judge positively, negatively, I really don't mind. But yeah, so this is just a little bit of a little taste of what's kind of in Shadow of Evolution. Now obviously, I don't want you, the viewer, to think that this is exactly what it's going to be in Shadow of Evolution, because granted, yes, this is how I perceive these. Like I said, this is concept art and it is just ideas that I wanted to jot down. And as for you, I don't want you to go in thinking that this is how things exactly are in the novel. I want people to go reading the novel with an open mind and with whatever visual interpretation they want it to be. I can preach to you saying how Rome or Baron looks all day long, but it's up to you and up to your, creative prowess to determine how they really look to what you think, and how it's described in the book as well. Now, it is kind of different though. If you do directly describe how something looks, then yeah, it's a little bit different, but you get the point. I want to leave that, the very visual, illustrative purpose is up to you on how you want to perceive some of these things. But aside from all that, I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.